because I believe as a man, it is our duty. It's a sacred duty that I think God has placed on our shoulders, is to sacrifice our lives for others, particularly for our families, our wives, and our children, but for society.
I was fortunate enough to meet my great grandfather. He died only when I was 15 years old. So he would tell me stories, and he was born in 1913. So in 1926, he bought a car. The maturity was just different, but it wasn't a thing where you were just treated as a teenager. You were treated as a man of how you represented yourself. So how do we kind of bring back some of those fundamentals with our kids in 2024?
She's not sexually attracted to her man. She's not even attracted to him at all. She's just using him as basically a glorified servant, like lapdog. And she's doing everything. She's taking care of everything. She's at her wit's end most of the time. And then she's got this man in her life that's supposed to be a husband, but because society has worked on both of them from different angles, she's just treating him like he's another son of her, another child of hers that she's got to manage.
Adam Allred, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Adam, you are a father, husband, and entrepreneur. Adam, how I got familiar with you is I actually saw a TikTok, and it wasn't your account. It was someone had reposted a video, and I thought, this guy knows what he's talking about. And I could tell that it was genuine and that it was something that you were living. And then I had a gal send me a video on Instagram that was a pretty long video, like maybe 3 minutes. And I just couldn't stop watching it. You were talking about masculinity, femininity. And I was like, I have got to find this guy. And it was your page, left a comment. Next thing you know, we're DMing and texting. And here we are today. So again, I want to thank you for hopping on. And I figured we would just...
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, man. I appreciate you having me on the show, and I'm glad that you reached out and we made this connection.
Yeah, no, same. And I want to jump right into it. What is masculinity?
Well, I think that's like probably one of the most important questions that our society can ask right now is, what is masculinity, particularly for men? I think there's a lot that goes into being masculine, but I think at the end of the day, what I define masculinity as being is basically being the most powerful, capable, useful version of yourself, like to be in a constant state of leveling up. And there's a lot of things that go into that. When I say be powerful, sometimes people misunderstand me and they think I mean be selfish, like just powerful for your own sake. And what I mean by that is that you can only be useful to other people to the extent that you are capable of doing those things. And so you have to level up to get better to help other people. And I don't believe masculinity is leveling up for your own sake. I think masculinity is making yourself the most vibrant, powerful, biggest, fastest version of yourself so that you can help the most amount of people, so that you can be the most useful. Because I believe as a man, it is our duty. It's a sacred duty that I think God has placed on our shoulders, is to sacrifice our lives for others, particularly for our families, our wives, and our children, but for society. And I don't mean necessarily die for the cause, although that can be the case. I think it means live for the cause, like live your life in a way that you make the other people around you, the world around you, a better place. And you can only do that by self-improvement. And I think too often we miss that. I think got people, a lot of boys that haven't become men yet are looking for outcomes. They're looking for things to measure their success and their masculinity based off of things that they've acquired, stuff. And I think it's not that. It's the personal development of character that you create within yourself that makes you a better human being for everybody else around you.
I love it. I love it. So as fathers, if we weren't shown what it was to be raised with a masculine state of mind, how is it that we can now take the children that we do have and raise them and build them into becoming masculine men? Because I've read that, in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, there was no such term as teenager. I remember I was fortunate enough to meet my great grandfather in he died only when I was 15 years old. So he would tell me stories. And when he was 13 years old, he was born in 1913. So in 1926, he bought a car. He bought a car because he's like, you worked, and the maturity was just different. He had a job, so he bought a car. and he would drive that car at 13 years old. But it wasn't a thing where you were just treated as a teenager. You were treated as a man of how you represented yourself. So, how do we kind of bring back some of those fundamentals with our kids in 2024?
Yeah, and that's another. I mean, you're just dropping like the absolute most important questions, in my opinion. And it goes back to what we were just talking about. One, you have to be that person first. So how do you turn a boy into a man if you're not already a man yourself? And it always goes
Yeah.
back to that for me. It always goes back to making sure you're in fighting shape for what you're trying to do. And you can't teach your son, you can't teach anybody else what it means to be a man until you first identify what that means for you, and then start conforming your life towards that. And you live in that way, and you can start to teach that. And I think you're spot on. It used to be the world was hard enough and difficult enough, and not only that, but you had society and you had church and you had families all in this same sort of mindset to help create masculinity. It used to be baked into society. There's rites of passages for men. And I think boys,
Hmm.
were men earlier than they are now. They had to go through tough things. They had to work hard, and you had this entire support structure to help facilitate that. And now that's gone. I don't think we have any of that. I think you get the worst kind of messaging right now from the world. You get the worst kind of messaging from church. And I go to church, but it's the worst kind of messaging. It's like Jesus was a pacifist, and men just know your lane and put your head down and just do what you're told and be subservient to
Yeah.
your wives and be sweet and harmless. That's basically what most Christianity, in my opinion, is pushing right now. My church, particularly. You got culture that's attacking masculinity at every corner. You got families that you had dads that are either absent or they don't even know what it means to be a man. They don't even, or they don't know how to articulate it. So they haven't even spent the time with their sons to teach them that. So you get so many boys that are growing up right now in the feminine energy. They grow up with a single mom or a mom that's
Hmm.
basically doing most of the work by herself. They roll into the school system, which is primarily females. And when they finally get
90%
out of
teachers.
that, yeah, just female teachers. And so they're constantly the authority figure in their life is a female. And that's what they look up to. And that's what they're trying to figure out how to be a man, which of course is there's no shot they're going to figure that out. So they're constantly confused. They don't know who they are. They don't know what their purpose is. They don't know why they're here. And so you see this huge disconnect. And then they roll out of school and they're conditioned to go be a second class citizen to a wife. Like, go find a wife,
Hmm.
put her on a
Yeah.
pedestal, and serve her until you die, and that's your role. And basically, you're just trading one mother, female authority figure, for another one in a marriage, and nobody wins by this. This isn't like a win for females. I mean, I constantly, it's surprisingly how my messaging on social media is towards men, and it's telling men we need to rise up and start being better for our women, for our children, for society. I'm surprised at how many women are following me now. Like, I get more and more women every
It's,
day, percentage wise, following because they want to be a part of this process. They want to understand what it means to be a man. They want to help facilitate that. And they're desperate for it. They want leadership. They want guys to be masculine again. So I think we're really kind of up against this we're up against the matrix. We're up against this programming
mhm.
right now that is trying to destroy us and separate us. It's trying to destroy our identities. It's trying to destroy our families. It's trying to destroy our society. That's a whole rabbit hole to go down, but it is clear to me that society and the powers that be are determined to break men down and keep men isolated, to keep men in this state of uncertainty, this state of like not knowing who they are, what their identity is, and being conditioned to be subservient to females. And it's just bad for everybody.
Yeah, I have the same thing on social media, and I'm sure you've seen this. 90% of all my comments are from females. 90% of the comments. And it's kind of split in the middle of 50% of the comments will say, yes, yes, my husband needs to see this. Yes, yes. The other 50% of my comments are women saying, no, the wife controls the energy. No, it is the mother who we are the ones who dictate it, not the husbands. And it's like, well, you may be the exception. You may be that woman who is um is has a masculine energy compared to the spectrum of women, but most likely you're not being led by a masculine man. Most likely he's not leading the ship, and he is just falling in line. And it was very surprising the amount of women who would disagree that the man controls the energy in the house. I was um, but then on the other hand, with the way that society is going, exactly what you said, it's like, I guess it's not that surprising that. It is
Yeah,
women who
and how
feel
do you
that they
change that? I mean,
control.
it
Yeah.
starts here with grassroots, right? Us just talking
Mhm.
about this and gathering together like-minded people. I mean, there's going to be people that are out in left field and they don't have any self-awareness. They don't know what, a lot of these women, it's not even their fault. Like the ones you're referring to, they're disagreeing with you. They don't know any better either because they've been conditioned by society and told that they are supposed to be supreme and that they're basically, we live in a society right now that I think shifted from being patriarchal society to largely a matriarchal society right now, or at least
Yeah.
we're on that in that direction. And so women are told that they're supposed to step up, and the fact that they have these husbands and these men in their lives that are still boys, and haven't ever
Yep.
matured into being a man, they have to take on that role. And then they're told that they're happy and that's what you should be doing, and they're not. I mean, or at least they don't
Mhm.
understand what else is out there for them. Um,
Yeah.
because I don't run into any when I run into those types of families and dynamics all the time in the work that I do and in social media comments, and they're not healthy relationships from my observation. Like she's not sexually attracted to her man. She's not even attracted to him at all. She's just using him as basically a glorified servant, like lapdog. And she's
Mhm.
doing everything. She's taking care of everything. She's at her wits' end most of the time. And then she's got this man in her life that's supposed to be a husband, but because society's worked on both of them from different angles, she's just treating him like he's another son of her, another child of hers that she's got to manage. And and somehow they get convinced that that's cool and good, this whole happy wife happy life thing. And I'm like, I just don't see anybody, like I don't see any of those relationships when I observe them. And not that I have a comprehensive view of every relationship out there, and like you said, I'm sure there's exceptions, but I don't see any of those relationships to be like, oh, that looks like a dynamic relationship that I'd want to have in my life. Like they all look
Yeah.
sad and depressing to me. And there's this enmity between the masculine and the feminine energy in that space. It's kind of passive aggressive. It's like underneath the surface, and it's not healthy in my observation.
Exactly. And those men in those relationships are living in quiet desperation. Those women, those women are living with very high cortisol levels, and they are two people who are living together, and the wife often feels that her sole focus is on the children. So then
Hmm.
once their children leave the house, they don't even know each other. It's like, yes, they live together and they may love each other, but they don't even know each other anymore because they've thought that they also love their children more than they're supposed to love themselves because they didn't have a relationship to begin with. They're not sleeping together, most
Yeah.
likely. Um, yeah. And then probably both that man and woman, they were the way they were programmed was by similar situation by their parents as well, oftentimes. And so it's and we forget that we can reprogram ourselves. We don't have to grow up to be our father. We don't have to grow up to be our mother, but it's easy. It's easy. And like you were saying, if we're not leveling up, then it's very easy for us to just be a society where we're all complacent and just going off with the programming we had.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. It goes back to that quote. I don't remember who said it, but I saw it kicking around on social media for a while, and it made so much sense to me. Is you pick your heart in life, and you can take that lifestyle, that programming that you've inherited from your family, from society, or whatever, and stick with it. And it might seem easier to stay programmed and keep your head kind of in the ground, um, than to wake up and start taking accountability for your life and start recognizing you actually have control over it. So on the at least initially, it's a lot easier just to stay in the programming. You don't have to ruffle anybody's feathers. You don't have to do anything crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to really exert yourself. You just kind of stay in this miserable state. But that's hard. And in the long game, it's the biggest loss. Like how much time is wasted when you're just stuck in really crappy, low energy, miserable situations and relationships. It's just such a catastrophe, I think. On the other hand, if you're willing to step up and take your hits and willing to open up your eyes and start to see things as they really are, which means you're going to have to dismiss a lot of programming, especially the hardest part is dismissing programming from people that you love, that raised you, like your
Yep.
parents. Like that just doesn't make sense. It doesn't work, but it's the same conditioning they had. They kind of pass on these toxic traditions, or the lack of communication and leveling up. And so you have so many people confused. And I think part of the biggest problem, going back to what we were talking about a minute ago, is like they don't know, like you were saying, they don't know who each other are anymore. But I think even more fundamentally, they don't know who they are themselves. They don't even have a
Yeah.
grasp on themselves because they're just going through the programming that's been handed to them from all these different sources. And they have attached their identity to that, but they've never really gone into that deep soul work and said, who am I? What do I want out of life? What do I want to accomplish? They don't even know what they want. They're just like, they think they know what they want because somebody told them that. You want to go get
Hmm.
this job. You want to marry this as quick as you can. You want to start making some kids and you want to just stay in your lane and do what you're told and don't question anything. And that's what you want. And, you kind of program with that. So you start thinking that way. And so a lot of people never wake up. To me, that's the modern day zombie apocalypse. It's just the
Yeah.
complete lack of critical thinking and self-awareness from so many of us. And I think that's really the most important thing that we can do, at least that I feel like, is to try and wake people up to that. Like, you don't have to be the product of your programming. You can do the heavy lifting of figuring out who you are. It's just not easy to do. And it takes
Hmm.
time and it takes some work and figuring out what you really want out of life. Like, this life is this awesome time to create whatever you want out of life, not to just do what you're told and play it safe. Like we're told all the time. It's like the worst messaging. Just follow someone else, do what you're told and be safe and don't take any risks. I'm like, now's the time, this life, to take risks. Go fuck up, go scuff up your knees, fall down, get back up, learn something. Like, but keep applying yourself, keep figuring out more and more who you are. Peel back these layers of self-deception, these layers of justification, really get to the core of who you are, and then pursue that. Because when you do that, life becomes so incredible. When you can figure out what you want and who you are, and then you're willing to sacrifice and put in the work and take the hits to go in that direction, that's where things just become incredibly amazing in life, in my opinion. And I have the contrast between two because I didn't start waking up until about 5 years ago. I was pretty deep in all of the programming. I went through a really, really crappy marriage because I didn't have the tool set. I didn't have the self-awareness or even know who I was on how to
Yeah.
manage that any differently. And now I'm finally like kind of waking up to that and learn a lot of stuff. And I just want to like liberate everybody else because the contrast is so much better. Like, it is so much
Hmm.
better to do the heavy soul work and lifting right now to figure out these things and then work towards that than to just stay in this lane of misery that is guaranteed. That's a broad road to hell, in my opinion. Like, when the scriptures talk about this, the metaphor, like that's what hell looks like, is just following the system, doing what you're told, not
Yeah.
questioning. That's leading you off the edge. That's where you're going. And until you
Yeah.
wake up and start going against the current and fighting your way against this tide of humanity and start like moving in the direction you want to do, which is you're gonna have a lot of adversity doing that. You're gonna be going off that cliff with everybody else.
Yeah. And I think it was Jordan Peterson who said, hell on earth, that is hell because you're living in it.
And I
Yeah.
think hell on earth, that whole, so much of the scriptures. I'm a scripture reading man.
Hmm.
I'm a God fearing man. It looks different than I think a lot of other people. I don't do the dogmatic sort of religious thing anymore, where some preacher or somebody's interpreted the scriptures a certain way and then told me how to view it and told me what to think, and then I just have to like yell that louder than everybody else so they can know that I'm a believer. I don't believe that. I think the relationship with God is very personal and very nuanced, and it's going to look different
Hmm.
for everybody, and God's going to communicate to everybody differently because we're all different levels of progression. When I
Yeah.
read through the scriptures now, um, I read the scriptures as just metaphors. Like, I don't
Hmm.
I don't have to take them literally. It doesn't mean that they're not literal. I read my scriptures every single day, but when I strip out worrying about whether it's literal or not, and I just get into the metaphor, the wisdom that is contained in these writings, like that's where all the magic is, in my opinion. That's
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
really start to learn things, and you don't have to defend stupid points. Like, there's so many when the ultra religious that just take these stands on these anthills and they don't even really know what they're talking about. They're just been programmed by religion to say this is the answer, and then they stop progressing. They get on this anthill
Yeah.
and they have to defend it, and they can't be open to new ideas or open to new concepts. It's like, we've already got God figured out. We've already got this life figured out, and we know what we're supposed to do. And part of that is to over shout over everybody, love Jesus, just love Jesus, and you're saved. And I'm like, dude, you guys, you don't have a freaking clue what's going on. None of us do. Like, we're all in this life walking by faith, and we have some indicators and some lights here and there to give us some direction, but to pretend like we have some sort of significant understanding of the process. We're up on a little bit of a tangent, but this is something that I always just like get caught up on, a little soapbox of just like the famous saying. I can't remember who said this one, but God save us from the certain ones. Like, you just have to approach the divine with a
Hmm.
great deal more humility and faith than the certainty with which I see the religious approach God. I have no use for the religious anymore, like, as far as that mindset. And I used to be that way. I used to be very, very religious, and I finally started waking up red pilling out of religion and getting
Hmm.
just into harmony with God as to the best of my ability.
Yeah. I've been in a I'm in a Bible study group. I was baptized 3 years ago, about 3 days before my second son was born. I was like, I gotta get baptized. Greatest thing I ever did was get baptized and try and give my life to God. And then, but the more that I'm in the faith, the more I see that myself I separate from the church, or that I see things differently than maybe people in my own Bible study group. Um, like I have a hard time when people in my Bible study group are feel that they're not worthy of God's love, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me because I look at God as gravity. No one fucking disputes gravity, and if God is saying that He loves me, I'm fucking. It's up there with gravity. It's objective. So, and I don't understand. This is now my tangent going off of yours. I often don't understand how it is that someone doesn't believe that God truly loves them and that they're not worthy when that's all he says is that I love you. And if we truly believe, I understand if someone's not a believer or they're just dabbling. But when I would have people in my group who are leading us, who are supposed to be leading our group, who are like, I'm not worthy. It's like, well, when we get to the gates of heaven and he says, why should I let you in? Fucking none of us are worthy.
Yeah.
But the fact that he says that he loves us, it's like I believe he loves me. I'm in. Like not in the gates, but I'm in that he loves me. I'm not going to question that he loves me or not. Um, so
Yeah.
that's something I've always had a hard time with is people who are like, I don't think God loves me though.
Well, and I think the issue, from my observation, from my personal experience, right? Like
Mhm.
the issue, one, no, children are not born with shame. Like they don't experience shame until they're taught to be shameful of something by their
Often
parents or
by
by
their
their
parents,
friends.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Like shame gets taught to us, and religion is a big peddler of shame. This is one of my problems. It's the middle management that gets in the way. And when I read Christ in the New
Yes.
Testament, the Gospels, the only this is important because this should be like a wake up call for anybody who's religious, because the only condemnation Christ had was for the religious, the people who claimed to know who he was and claimed to speak for
Mhm.
him, and then inserted themselves in this relationship between the people and God and said, "You work to God through us." And essentially, that's what religion does. Organized religion creates a
Mhm.
system that says you kind of got to go through this system to get to God. And Christ never is saying that. He's saying, I love you. Come unto me. You don't need anybody
Mhm.
else. It's just me and you. You come
Yes.
to me and I'll work with you and we'll work out your life together. And I'm your advocate. But you get this whole these religious layers that come in, and they have to, as a religion, I guess they don't have to, but every, without exception, they all do this. They create these carrots and these sticks. There's this incentive for doing good, following the court with the religious dogma, which is you're going to be saved. Here's the answers to the test at the end of this life. You're going to get all these carrots we're going to give you, but then there's also all these sticks, and a big one that they use in religion is shame. Like my religion, the church that I go to is a big peddler of shame. Like they create all that. It's all just baked into the system. Where like if you don't do certain things according to their standards, then you get disciplined and you get less standing in the church and you get less. Um, you have to go through some like repentance process to be able to be forgiven of your sins. And it's like I don't, the more I've come to God, the more and more I've just found that to be super dishonest and not accurate at all. Like I don't have to go through a repentance process with God. I just have to turn my
Mhm.
heart to him, and instantaneously he's welcoming me back. Like I'm the one that separates myself from God. And the second I go back to God, he's there. There's not like a process
Yeah.
to that. And there's no shame. He's not coming to me and be like, okay, but did you really learn your lesson? Because I don't know if I can, spend time with you right now if you haven't really, really internalized this lesson. He's like, oh yeah, come with me. Let's work on this. You got something to work on, but I'm
Exactly.
with you every step of the way. Like that's the relationship I have. Too often religion, middle management, gets in between us and God. And I know there's a place for religion and there's a place for people that, a lot of the things that we have are preserved because of a religion, like the scriptures. I
Mhm.
understand that you need structure and you need a place where people can start with basic fundamentals. But I think too often the problem is the religious power apparatus is too concerned about building the business and too concerned about building followers and too concerned about a whole host of other things, being politically correct and you know making everybody happy and being tolerant, that we sacrifice the truth for this mess of pottage all the time in religion. And then you're just way off base, and then people are are, they're confused. They're not connected directly to God anymore. They're working through this very imperfect system with very, very imperfect people. They start to identify God that way. It creates a whole host of problems because they don't have that really intimate personal relationship that is just me and God. It's not me and my wife and God. It's not me and my children and God. It's not me and religion. My relationship with God is just me and God. That's it. And that's the only person I'm working with now. And that's been extraordinarily liberating. Like I feel like I'm in a much healthier place spiritually than I've ever been my entire life, as I've separated myself more and more from dogma and from the control of religion and just gone to God directly. And like I said, I still go to church. I still see value there. I think it's a great place to bring a family and have, you know, um, a collective, like this is our moral system that we're working
Mhm.
with. But I
Yeah.
constantly feel like I have to undo the bullshit from church, like with my kids. Like, yeah, that was right. That was right. That's not right, guys. That is just absolute horseshit. Like, you're not going to hell. Someone's not going to hell if they drink, whatever this or do that. It's like God is working with everybody and we're all imperfect. We're all sinners. And at the end of the day, even if you are better than somebody else, the difference is going to be so intensely minuscule compared to Christ and perfection that it's not even worthy of talking about. Like
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
small compared to the gap between you and Christ. So it's like we all should just shut up and stop worrying about somebody else's worthiness and whether they're a good person or not. We should just be focused on our own journey with God.
Yeah. We're comparing grains of sand when he has the entire universe in his palm. Yeah. Uh,
Bingo.
I do the same thing with my family. We were going to a church every weekend until the actually funny enough right before COVID because our pastor just got too political for me. And I was just like, you as a person who's leading a congregation should not be talking about politics, let alone things like these. Um, implying, that we all have racism in us.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, this is not cool. I get that it's trendy right now, 2018, 2019, but this isn't cool. Um, they would imply like, hey, there's X amount of percentage of these types of people in where we live. We need to bring those people in church. Go out and bring those people in our church. And it's like, okay. And it was all in the name of diversity. But to me, diversity is not a color palette. To me, diversity is your life experiences. Because just because I went to a private school and my parents got bachelor's degree, and my best friend who's black, he went to a private school. Both of his parents had college degrees. Doesn't mean that there's any diversity really between us.
Mm.
We living the same upper middle class, but because he fits a color palette, they're like, bring that guy because he's diverse. And it's like, why not the white kid who's grown up in fucking crazy poverty his whole life for multiple generations just because they haven't shaken it? That kid, that's diversity. Or the old guy. Let's bring in the 80-year-old. That's diverse. All of our life experiences. So they were pushing a lot of that. So we kind of stopped going, and then they were getting pretty political during COVID. We had a professional athlete in our Bible study group who went to the church, and they tried to get him to do a commercial to stay at home, wear your mask. And it's like, dude, you better not do that because he was against it all.
Yeah.
And they were trying to get him to do a commercial
Put
because
pressure on them.
he's influential. Yeah. And it's like, I can't go here anymore. And it's a big, beautiful church. So my
Yeah.
wife, who never grew up being a believer, she liked it. It's big and beautiful, shiny,
Mm.
all the cool things. Latte bar, free fucking coffee, you know, the whole bit. Uh, and it's like, let's go find some small startup church. And so like that's what we try and do now. But it's like, um, none of this is what he's talking about is in the Bible. None of
None of
this
it,
is in the
man.
Bible.
And
This
it
is in the Bible.
sounds like your journey is very similar to mine. I was born and raised in the church that I'm at, and I just accepted everything as it was told me. Like,
Hmm.
and now like I said, I'm starting to wake up and I'm starting to see so much of that stuff is really not helpful and it's actually really destructive. Shame being one of the big ones, but there's a lot of things.
Yes.
But my church did the same thing. They started gaslighting everybody if they weren't wearing masks, weren't vaccinated, if they weren't doing the whole like song and dance. And I'm like, I got eyes to see. I'm not an idiot. I was like, this is bullshit. Like all of this stuff is bullshit, and everybody's just like getting on board because it's like, hey, it's like what everybody's doing. It's like um, the mob mentality. It's what everybody's doing. We got to all do it or whatever. And I started waking up because my church started getting political. I don't have a problem with church being political in a sense. I'm not strictly political. I have a problem with the church not telling the truth and playing politics. To
Hmm.
me,
Yeah, yeah,
religion's only purpose is to be a safeguard of the truth. And when religion starts trading the truth for convenience, or they're trading it to be, part of the program of society, if they start trading truth to be politically correct or to push these narratives like these racial identity narratives, or to tell, like my church, the same thing. I can't tell you how many people, pastors, we refer to them as not as pastors, but how many of them, um, thanks, bro, how many of them have pushed this narrative that we're all racist, like, or that we've got to fight racism. And I'm like, I honestly don't know a single racist person. I don't know anybody that's racist. Like, I know there are racist
yeah,
people out there. I know that. I'm not naive. I've been in the past, like in my long time ago, I've experienced some racism. I've seen some of that, but I don't know anybody in my circles now. Nobody. Like, nobody cares what your skin color is. Like, and yet we just kept getting pushed this thing, like hit over the head with it, like stop being racist, stop. And I'm like, dude, who are you talking to right now? Like,
yeah.
it's just not helpful, but it's because it sounds good to the world. It sounds acceptable. It's
Hmm.
like the right thing to say. It's not the truth. But the truth isn't important anymore to religion, in my opinion. What's important is these other things, like building the church and being presentable to the world, and being politically correct, and all these other things that like, this middle management gets more caught up in doing than in actually safeguarding the truth. And I think you should tell the truth whether it's political or not, but the truth should come first before anything else. The second you trade the truth for anything else, you're not the truth anymore. And I think that's these littler churches that you're talking about are the only ones that I saw, like during COVID and stuff, that were making any sense. Like these like lonely pastors out on islands, because mainstream Christianity just took the bait, hook, line, and sinker, and like totally
Yeah,
capitulated and had. And that's my problem with my church and with mainstream Christianity is I don't think they're involved at all in the fight for the heart and soul of this country. We're living in a freaking circus, dude. Everything is upside down. The world is out of control. All of the wrong messaging and programming is getting pushed on people, and mainstream Christianity, the big organizations, are completely useless. They are doing nothing to combat this evil or these deceptions and these lies. They're becoming more and more every day more complicit with them. And that's where I
yes,
saw littler churches like that. I'm not attending, but I follow them, like these pastors on social media and YouTube. I'm listening to guys. I'm like, thank God there are still some people out there that are telling the truth in this space, because I feel like I'm just living in crazy land with all. I just keep getting told this stuff that's just complete nonsense, and everybody's just nodding their head like, yeah, we shouldn't be racist. Well, yeah, we should all get vaccinated. This is the way we show Christ like love, is if we all get our shots. Like, yeah, and I'm just like, dude, what the hell is going on? Like, we got to wake up. And that's when I started like red pilling, was when I saw the lies and the deceptions being pushed as the will of God from my church, and I was
yeah.
like, I can't do this anymore. Like, that's where the whole house of cards started to fall down.
No, it's I would mine happened a little bit before all that, and my parents don't understand why I was such a rebel, but I'm fucking glad that there is that rebel bone in me, because they joke that they don't know where it came from, but I mean I've even still have in my bio never wear a mask, never freaking get
Ever.
that shot, and my wife's like, people aren't gonna might not want to follow you. It's like they'll at least know who the fuck I am. They'll know
Yeah.
who I am as a person, that I've been saying it since day one. It's like in my archives on Instagram, March 2020, don't comply. Go to the beach
Don't
outside.
comply.
Look at all these people living free lives, not wearing masks. It's like I was doing that from day one. And then when the churches were getting involved, I'm like, this is just too much. It's like we should be a land of free men to make a choice if we want to come. Because even this is gonna be my last rant about the church. There was even a point where they were forcing everyone to do it via via virtual,
Mm,
even when like the towns weren't officially locked down. It's like you're just part of the problem.
yeah. Bingo.
Um, but I want to, before we got a couple more minutes, let's talk about success in marriage, and then I want you to tell us what ninefold is.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So success in marriage.
Yeah, how do you have a successful marriage, like for those young men or men who want to turn it around? Marriage is something I talk a lot about, and I want to get your thoughts on it as well.
Yeah. So this is something I think about all the time because I have the contrast between two marriages. I had a really, really bad first marriage. I didn't know what it meant to be a man. I didn't know how to manage it at all. So I just played into the role that is kind of handed to you again, like just kind of like doing what you're told. Just she's the boss. You just kind of let her do her thing, and it was not good for either one of us, and it ended in a divorce. And so the first thing is the first thing I just keep going back to this. If you want to get married, you first have to know who you are. So first, do that work. Really discover who you are, because you until you can present yourself authentically in the relationship and say, "This is who I am," and then have really and vice versa. She needs to know who she is, and then have really clear communication with each other about what your expectations are and what you both feel marriage should look like, and making sure you're on the fundamental stuff on the same page, and not just saying that because you want to get along, but you saying who you really are. So when I came into the second marriage, I knew who I was coming into my second
Mm-hmm.
marriage. And I had really clear communication. We both did with each other about what marriage was going to look like and what we wanted. And we were on the same page. And then the other thing I think you have to remember is when you get married, the work isn't over. And everybody says marriage is hard, but there's also this notion that, especially for a lot of guys that are lonely, that if I can just get the girl, it's like happily ever after. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Like, your life and your happiness shouldn't have anything to do with another human being. It shouldn't. Now, we do that because we're humans. It needs to be you internally finding your way with God. That's where happiness and joy and fulfillment comes from, is when you're living in your element. And then when you're healthy and strong like that, and you're independent and you're not looking for somebody to come along and make you happy or fill in the gaps in your life that are missing, now, guess what? You attract somebody like that because you attract who you are, not what you want. You attract who
Mm-hmm.
you are. So when you're a badass and when you know yourself and you're strong and you're confident and you're vibrant and you're living this good life and you're not lonely and depressed and hoping to find somebody to fill that up, now you can meet somebody just like that as well. And now you come together because it makes sense, not out of desperation or need. You're coming together because you're like, yeah, my life would be better with this person. Oh, and she thinks the same thing about me. Her life would be better with me. So that's the starting point. And you got to make yourself attractive to as many women. I tell guys this all the time. And sometimes like the nice guy syndrome is like, hey, I'm going to be nice and I'll have a job and I'll be relatively healthy and a good guy and I'll be really, really nice. And there should be a girl waiting for me when I show up. And I was like, that's not how it works. Like, there's a song and a dance to courtship. And as a man, your job should be, if you care seriously about finding the right girl to get married to, your job should be to be as attractive to as many women as possible. It's just like at
Mm-hmm.
work. Like, if I want to hire somebody for a position, do I interview 3 people or do I interview 100 people? Well, if I interview 100 people, I got a lot better chance of picking the best person for the job than if I have 3 people.
Yeah.
Those are my only options. I'm going to pick between three. And unless I win the lottery, I'm probably not going to pick somebody as good as like the 100. And then if I've got 1,000 interviews that I'm doing for a job, it's going to be better than the 100. You're interviewing, and they are too. You're interviewing for the most important job in your life, which is going to be your spouse, right? So you should make
Yes.
yourself as attractive to as many women as possible. And I'm not saying go out and take advantage of people. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying be interesting enough to as many women that you have the ability to pick who's the best fit for you, and vice versa. As a woman, as many men as you can. Like, you want to get out there and meet people, in my opinion. Sometimes lightning strikes. There's a handful of relationships I've seen where they were high school sweethearts or whatever, or they just met in some random way and it was happily ever after. But for the most part,
Yeah.
like, this is just kind of practically how it works. So you pick the best person you can, you do the work to make yourself accessible to the most amount of people, women, men, that you can. And then when you get married, you don't stop. Like, that process of being attractive and appealing to your spouse is something you can't let up on now that you're married. And I think so many times I see this with guys. It's like, I'm married now. I can hang up the spurs. I don't have to be that anymore because I got the woman. And so now I just do my job and I come home and, we have dinner and put the kids to bed. And that's kind of like the end of your romance. It's the end of your chemistry in your marriage. Like, as a man, like, I feel like I have to know my wife well enough to know what her turn-ons are, what her turn-offs are,
Yeah.
like who she is, what works, what doesn't work. I'm managing and I'm trying to make myself as attractive as I can to my wife, not in a desperate way, not because I need that, but because it's important to me to have chemistry. It's important to me to have romance in my relationship. And the only way to do that is if I'm if I'm trying to be attractive and impressive to her, and she's doing the same for me, and then you have this really dynamic relationship. But it takes work, and it takes a realization that after marriage, the real work becomes like kicks in, and that's where you cannot ever allow yourself to take for granted the relationship you have. You should constantly be doing something every day to try and impress your spouse, and vice versa. And then there's a whole host of other things you got to manage. You got to manage boundaries. You got to be able to communicate really clearly when you have a boundary that your spouse is like coming up against, like why you have that boundary. You got to be able to articulate that in a loving way, in a supportive way, but be clear about it and firm on the things that are important to you, so you don't start getting taken advantage of. Because I see a lot of guys give up their boundaries after they get married. It's like I get married, and now like the wife just starts to like infringe on so many aspects of his life, and then pretty soon he's just kind of almost, so he's like almost an indentured servant to that point, to this,
Yeah.
and he has no boundaries, and she has no attraction for him because he has no boundaries. One of the biggest attractions for women is like a man that gives her boundaries, and women will argue with me all the time on this, and they're just wrong. They're just not self-aware. Like a woman is attracted to a man who is a man first, who's like, dude, I
Yeah.
know who I am, and I got my boundaries, and she's that's attractive. It gives her confidence in that guy. It gives her a sense of security. It gives her a sense that this guy's going to take care of shit. If shit hits the fan, he's going to take care of it. As opposed to, I've got this weak ass beta male guy that's a sim. Now, if the shit hits the fan, I'm the one that's going to have to take care of it. They might think that's
Yeah.
cool, but in reality, like it's not attractive. At least not on a biological sexual level. I just don't see that being attractive for women ever.
No, I completely agree. It puts a woman in when she has to take over in a fight or flight, when and that's not where women need to be. They don't even want to breed when they're in that state of mind. Their
The cortisol
cortisol
levels
levels are
are up,
going through
like
the
you
roof.
said. Yeah,
No, any woman who thinks that, they just, like you said, they just don't know any better. They
yeah.
don't actually understand the reality,
Somebody told them
biology
that's
of
how
it.
they're supposed to think, and then they were just programmed, and they just spew that
Oh,
nonsense.
the last decade and a half is telling them that they're supposed to do that.
Right.
Is telling them the greatest thing they can do is go off and get a career and lead their family. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know any women on their deathbed who ever wish they pushed more papers.
Well, even that, I don't know any guy that loves going to work. I do, but most of the guys, 85% of people that go to work, men, don't like their
Mm,
jobs. So I've never understood why women wanted to race into that space so fast. Hear me roar. I'm like, you want to go into this failed system? Because most people aren't happy
yeah.
unless you're doing something you're really, really passionate about. Most people are just going to work because they have to. And so that's what you
Hmm.
want to do. You'd rather trade time with your family and with your kids for a paycheck and a W-2. Like, I don't understand it at all, but it's just how strong programming can be, because it can convince people to do things that are absolutely not in their best interest, and then convince them that it is in their best interest.
Yeah.
And
No,
there's a whole host of problems that come on the coattails of that.
I agree. And we'll have to do that in a part two. Adam, I really, really appreciate it. Shoot me a text of when we can do another one, because I feel
Okay,
like we
yeah,
got so much more to talk about.
excited to do it, man. Always one of my favorite things about this is meeting and then jamming with like-minded people. I feel like this is where we
Mhm.
really start to make the changes, is having conversations like this and people getting on board, and more of us connecting and getting together and building up this raging fire that's going to stem the tide, turn things around. I hope. Anyways, that's my prayer. Thanks for having
And
me, Jesse.
yeah, no, it is because it's community and not individuals who are going to be able to make those changes.
Yep.